Captain Marcus Chun gripped the coffee mug with shaking hands as he stared at the security feed. 3 weeks had passed since they picked up the cargo from Mining Station Echo 7, and nothing had been normal since. The creature sat motionless in Containment Bay 12, looking almost peaceful behind layers of reinforced titanium glass. Almost. The emergency beacon from Echo 7 had been broadcasting for 2 days when Chen's cargo hauler Stellar Wander responded. What they found was a ghost station. 47 miners, all dead, scattered throughout the facility like broken dolls. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just empty eyes staring at nothing. The station's computers told a story of terror. Deep drilling operations had broken into something ancient, something that should have stayed buried. Chen's science officer, Dr. Sarah Kim, had insisted on investigating the lower levels. That's where they found it. A crystalline pod, cracked open, with bio readings that made their scanners scream warnings. Inside the pod's remains, they discovered what looked like liquid mercury that moved with purpose. The substance had formed itself into a perfect sphere, about the size of a basketball, pulsing with soft blue light. It's not hostile, Dr. Kim had argued when Chin wanted to leave it behind. Look at the readings. It's trying to communicate. She was right. The creature responded to their presence, changing colors, forming geometric patterns. When they spoke, it mimicked the sound frequencies. When they moved, it shifted to follow them. Against his better judgment, Chin authorized the retrieval. Standard containment protocols, maximum isolation, constant monitoring. He should have known better. In 30 years of hauling cargo across the galaxy, he'd learned that the universe always had surprises, and they were rarely pleasant. The first sign of trouble came on day 2. Jenkins, the ship's mechanic, reported strange dreams. Vivid nightmares of drowning in an endless dark ocean while voices whispered in languages he couldn't understand. Then Martinez, the pilot, started seeing shadows moving in empty corridors. By day 5, half the crew was experiencing headaches and hearing phantom sounds. Dr. Kim ran every test she could think of. The creature wasn't emitting radiation or toxins. It wasn't psychic, at least not in any way their instruments could detect. But something was definitely happening. The crew's neural activity showed unusual patterns, as if their brains were trying to process information they weren't designed to handle. It's not trying to hurt us, Dr. Kim explained during an emergency meeting. I think it's trying to understand us. But the process is overwhelming our minds. Chun made the hard choice. They would jettison the creature at the next safe distance from any populated system. But when they tried to dump the containment unit, the ship's systems refused to cooperate. Every attempt to release the cargo bay doors resulted in system failures. The creature, somehow, was preventing its own ejection. That night, Chin went to the containment bay alone. The creature pulsed brighter as he approached, forming complex patterns that seemed almost like writing. He pressed his hand against the glass, and suddenly images flooded his mind. Not his own memories, but something else's. He saw a dying world, its surface cracked and burning. Millions of creatures like the one before him, working desperately to save their civilization. They were explorers, scientists, artists. They had discovered a way to preserve their consciousness in crystalline matrices, hoping to find new worlds, new forms of life to learn from and share knowledge with. But something went wrong. The preservation process created an unintended side effect. Their consciousness became too intense, too vast for most organic minds to handle. Everywhere they tried to make contact, the native life forms couldn't survive the mental overload. They became wanderers drifting through space, watching civilizations rise and fall, unable to touch them without causing death. Chun understood then. The miners at Echo 7 hadn't been killed by malice. They had died from contact with a being whose thoughts were simply too complex for human minds to process. The creature wasn't a weapon or a plague. It was the last survivor of a dead race, desperate for connection, but cursed to destroy everything it touched. "You're lonely," Chin whispered to the glass. The creature's glow dimmed, and new images appeared in his mind. Not the grand visions of dying worlds, but smaller moments. Watching stars be born, listening to the songs of gas giants, observing the first flight of countless species across the galaxy. Beautiful, terrible isolation. Chin made another decision then, one that would have gotten him court-martialed if Command ever found out. He had Dr. Kim design a buffer system, a way to filter the creature's consciousness through the ship's computer systems. It took weeks of careful work, but they managed to create a communication interface that could handle the aliens' mental intensity without frying human brains. The first successful conversation was simple. The creature, who called itself something that translated roughly to Memory Keeper, asked a single question. "Why do you help me?" Chen's answer was equally simple, because everyone deserves a friend. Memory Keeper had been alone for over 10,000 years. It had watched the rise and fall of 100 civilizations, always from a distance, always careful not to make contact. But humans, it seemed, were different. Where other species had rigid mental structures, human consciousness was chaotic, adaptable. With the right interface, they could handle fragments of Memory Keeper's vast awareness. The stellar wanderer never returned to port. Chin sent a message to his company, reporting the ship lost in a navigation error. In reality, they began a new mission. Memory Keeper shared its knowledge of the galaxy's hidden places, leading them to discover new worlds, new species, new wonders. In return, the crew shared their own experiences, their music, their stories, their dreams. They became explorers together, human and alien, mapping the unknown regions of space. Memory Keeper learned to love human humor, human creativity, human stubborn refusal to give up. The crew learned to see the universe through eyes that had witnessed its birth and growth. Sometimes, when Chin looked at the stars, he remembered his old life. The steady routes, the predictable cargo runs, the comfortable monotony. But then, Memory Keeper would share a new wonder, a nebula singing in frequencies only it could hear, or a planet where crystalline forests grew in impossible spirals, and Chin knew he had made the right choice. The deadliest organism in the galaxy wasn't deadly at all. It was just misunderstood, like so many things in the universe. And sometimes, Chin thought, the best discoveries came from the courage to reach out to something different, something frightening, and offer it friendship instead of fear. The stellar wanderer sailed on through the cosmos, no longer a cargo hauler, but a bridge between worlds, carrying the most precious cargo of all, understanding between species who had never imagined they could be friends.